We have a few people to thank, and yeah, it seems like a good idea. People are sitting down. I think you're allowed to sit inside the sculpture. So I'd like to thank the many sponsors and supporters, the Standard New York, the Highline, which are both serving as the festival's hubs this year, although we're rolling along pretty well in Brooklyn without those hubs. I'd also like to thank the volunteers who have given their time to help at this and all of the other events. And then I would like to tell you just a tiny bit about the Invisible Dog. You are in the Invisible Dog Art Center. It was founded in 2009 by Lucien Zion, and it has private artist studios, a multi-purpose event space upstairs. I've been to a rockin' party there. And these two ground floor galleries, which you are inhabiting, and after the reading you can go into the rear one. And Risa Shoup, the assistant director of the gallery, curated the exhibit, which is our space for tonight. And I want to acknowledge the artist, R. Justin Stewart, who is here tonight, and he is the creator of this installation piece. It is titled Distorting, the Messiah Project 13G, and it's part of a larger body of work dealing with the Jewish concept of the Messiah. And last but not least, for the installation, the bread and wine are part of our theme and part of the installation, and they were created by Naama Shefi, who is a food writer and a culinary curator who works with chefs and cultural institutions to bring food and art together. She believes that food and art complement each other and that people can enjoy food with their minds as well as their taste buds. Now I will move on to our writers for the evening. I'm going to introduce all 5 of them, and then each one will step up in turn and just say her or his name, so you can be reminded of the order, if you can't tell already by recognizing them. We have Jennifer Egan, who is the author of several books, including The Invisible Circus, The Keep, and most recently, A Visit from the Goon Squad, which won the 2011 Pulitzer Prize and the LA Times Book Prize, as well as the National Book Critics Circle Award for Fiction. She's also received fellowships from the Guggenheim and the NEA. Our second reader will be the Norwegian author Karl O. Knausgaard, and his debut novel, Out of This World, won the Norwegian's Critics Prize. His novel, My Struggle, received the 2009 Braga Prize and Book of the Year Award in Morgenbladet, among other prizes. And our third reader will be Luc Sante, who is the author of Low Life, Evidence, and the Factory of Facts. He's a general editor of the Library of Larceny, and he teaches writing and the history of photography at Bard College. He also contributed a translation of the poem by Arthur Rimbaud to A Public Spaces, issue number 6, which is on sale, along with the books of all of the authors, all the books that are available. And next comes Teju Cole, photographer and author of Every Day is for the Thief, a novella, also author of the novel Open City, which was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award and the New York Public Library Young Lions Award, and the winner of the Penn Hemingway Award and the Rosenthal Award. So last but certainly not least, he did a portfolio for A Public Space in our issue 14, and that's also on sale. It's fabulous. Riikka Pulkkinen is our 5th reader tonight. She studied literature and philosophy at the University of Helsinki, and her debut novel, The Border, sparked great international interest when it came out in 2006. Her second novel, True, is her English debut, and I just got a chance to see a copy of the English version in the green room. It looks great. She received the Karl Prize in February of 2007 and the Lila Privasari Prize in May of 2007. So we have a great list of readers, and I just want to thank once again Penn, Invisible Dog, and A Public Space, which were the co-sponsors for this event, and thank you all for coming, and thank the readers for their participation. I'll be back at the end with a few closing remarks, but now I'll turn it over to Jenny Egan.
Thank you. It is great to be here. I'm reading first because I have a friend who's turning 50 tonight. I can't imagine what on earth that would be like. I'm going to go join him for his party, so I apologize in advance for the bad form of reading and running. I'm going to read from A Visit from the Goon Squad, because I haven't written anything else since, really. But also, I did feel there was kind of a Messiah connection. You can see what you think. And let's see, I will give you a little bit of context. This is a chapter called X's and O's. It takes place in 1997. And the narrator is a guy named Scotty, who is living a pretty marginal, almost sort of derelict life, and has discovered that his best friend from high school has become an extremely successful record producer, and decides to pay him an impromptu visit at his office. I'm just going to jump right in. Finally, Benny came out. He looked trim. He looked fit. He wore black trousers and a white shirt, buttoned at the neck, but no tie. I understood something for the very first time when I looked at that shirt. I understood that expensive shirts look better than cheap shirts. The fabric wasn't shiny. No, shiny would be cheap, but it glowed like there was light coming through from the inside. It was a fucking beautiful shirt, is what I'm saying. Benny's office was awesome, and I don't mean that in the male teenage skateboarding sense. Remember, this was 1997 when the word was not ubiquitous yet. I mean it in the old-fashioned literal sense. The desk was a giant jet black oval with a wet-looking surface like the most expensive pianos have. It reminded me of a black ice skating rink. Behind the desk was nothing but view, the whole city flung out in front of us the way street vendors fling out their towels packed with cheap, glittery watches and belts. That's how New York looked, like a gorgeous, easy thing to have, even for me. I stood just inside the door, holding my fish. Benny went around to the other side of the wet black oval of his desk. It looked frictionless, like you could slide a coin over the surface and it would float to the edge and drop to the floor. "Have a seat, Scotty," he said. "Wait," I said. "This is for you." I came forward and gently set the fish on his desk. I felt like I was leaving an offering at a Shinto shrine on top of the tallest mountain in Japan. The view was tripping me out. "You're giving me a fish?" Benny said. "That's a fish?" "Striped bass. I caught it in the East River this morning." Benny looked at me like he was waiting for the cue to laugh. "It's not as polluted as people think," I said, sitting down in a small black chair, one of two facing Benny's desk. He stood, picked up the fish, came around his desk, and handed it back to me. "Thanks, Scotty," he said. "I appreciate the thought, I really do, but a fish is bound to go to waste here in my office." "Take it home and eat it," I said. Benny smiled his peaceful smile, but he made no move to retrieve the fish. "Fine," I thought, "I'll eat it myself." "Talk to me, Scotty," Benny said. "You have a demo tape you want me to hear? You've got an album, a band, songs you're looking to have produced. What's on your mind?" He was leaning against the front of the black lozenge, ankles crossed. One of those poses that appears to be very relaxed, but is actually very tense. As I looked up at him, I experienced several realizations, all in a sort of cascade. One, Benny and I weren't friends anymore, and we never would be. Two, he was looking to get rid of me as quickly as possible with the least amount of hassle. Three, I already knew that would happen. I'd known it before I arrived. Four, it was the reason I had come to see him. "Scotty, you still there?" "So," I said, "you're a big shot now and everyone wants something from you." Benny went back around to his desk chair and sat there facing me. "Come on, Scotty," he said. "You write me a letter out of nowhere. Now you show up at my office. I'm guessing you didn't come here just to bring me a fish." No, that was a gift, I said. I came for this reason. I want to know what happened between A and B. Benny seemed to be waiting for more. A is when we were both in the band chasing the same girl. B is now. I knew instantly that it had been the right move to bring up Alice. I'd said something literally, yes, but underneath that I'd said something else. We were both a couple of asswipes, and now only I'm an asswipe. Why? And underneath that, something else. Once an asswipe, always an asswipe. And deepest of all, you were the one chasing, but she picked me. I've busted my balls, Benny said. That's what happened. Ditto. We looked at each other across the black desk, the seat of Benny's power. There was a long, strange pause, and in that pause, I felt myself pulling Benny back, or maybe it was him pulling me, back to San Francisco when we were 2 out of 4 flaming dildos. Benny, one of the lousier bass players you were likely to hear, a kid with brownish skin and hair on his hands, and my best friend. I felt a kick of anger so violent it made me dizzy. I closed my eyes and imagined coming at Benny across that desk and ripping off his head, yanking it from the neck of that beautiful white shirt like a knobby weed with long, tangled roots. I pictured carrying it into his swank waiting room by his bushy hair and dropping it on his assistant's desk. I rose from my chair. But at that same moment, Benny got up too, sprang up, I should say, because when I looked at him, he was already standing. Mind if I look out your window? I asked. Not at all. He didn't sound afraid, but I smelled that he was. Vinegar, that's what fear smells like. I went to the window. I pretended to look at the view, but my eyes were closed. After a while, I sensed that Benny had moved closer to me. You still doing any music, Scotty? He asked gently. I try, I said, mostly by myself, just to keep loose. I was able to open my eyes, but not to look at him. You were amazing on that guitar, he said. Then he asked, are you married? Divorced, from Alice. I know, he said, I meant remarried. It lasted 4 years. I'm sorry, buddy. All for the best, I said. Then I turned to look at Benny. He was standing there with his back to the window, and I wondered if he ever bothered to look out, if having so much beauty at close range meant anything at all to him. What about you, I asked. Married, 3-month-old son. He smiled, a waffly, embarrassed smile at the thought of his baby boy, like he knew he didn't deserve that much. And behind Benny's smile, the fear was still there, that I'd tracked him down to snatch away these gifts life had shoveled upon him, wipe them out in a few emphatic seconds. This made me want to scream with laughter. Hey, buddy, don't you get it? There's nothing you have that I don't have. But 2 thoughts distracted me as I stood there smelling Benny's fear. 1, I didn't have what Benny had. 2, he was right. Instead, I thought of Alice. This was something I almost never let myself do, just think of her, as opposed to thinking about not thinking about her, which I did almost constantly. The thought of Alice broke open in me, and I let it fan out until I saw her hair in the sun. Gold, her hair was gold, and I smelled those oils she used to dab on her wrists with a dropper. Patchouli, musk, I couldn't remember the names. I saw her face with all the love still in it, no anger, no fear, none of the sorry things I learned to make her feel. Come inside, her face said, and I did. For a minute, I came inside. I looked down at the city. Its extravagance felt wasteful, like gushing oil or some other precious thing Benny was hoarding for himself, using it up so no one else could get any. I thought, if I had a view like this to look down on every day, I would have the energy and inspiration to conquer the world. The trouble is, when you most need such a view, no one gives it to you. I took a long inhale and turned to Benny. Health and happiness to you, brother, I said. And I smiled at him for the first and only time. I let my lips open and stretch back, something I very rarely do because I'm missing most of my teeth on both sides. The teeth I have are big and white, so those black gaps come as a real surprise. I saw the shock in Benny's face when he saw. And all at once, I felt strong, as if some balance had tipped in the room and all of Benny's power, the desk, The view, the levitating chair, suddenly belonged to me. Benny felt it too. Power is like that. Everyone feels it at once. I turned and walked toward the door, still grinning. I felt light, as if I were wearing Benny's white shirt, and light was pouring out from inside it. "Hey, Scotty, hold on," Benny said, sounding shaken. He veered back toward his desk, but I kept walking, my grin leading the way into the hall and back toward the reception area, my shoes whispering on the carpet with each slow, dignified step. Outside the building, I walked directly to the box where I had mailed the letter to Benny a few days earlier. I bent my neck and squinted up at the tower of green glass, trying to count the floors to 45. And only then did I notice that my hands were empty. I left my fish in Benny's office. This struck me as hilarious, and I laughed out loud, imagining the corporate types seating themselves in the chairs in front of Benny's desk, one of them lifting the wet, heavy bag from the floor and then recognizing it. Oh, Christ, it's that guy's fish, dropping it, revolted. And what would Benny do, I wondered, as I walked slowly toward the subway? Would he dispose of the fish forever, then and there, or would he put it in the office refrigerator and take it home that night to his wife and baby son and tell them about my visit? And if he got that far, was it possible that he might open up the bag and take a look, just for the hell of it? I hoped so. I knew he'd be amazed. It was a shiny, beautiful fish. I wasn't good for much the rest of that day. I get a lot of headaches from eye damage I had as a kid, and the pain is so intense that it throws off bright, excruciating pictures. That afternoon, I lay on my bed and closed my eyes and saw a burning heart suspended in darkness, shooting off light in every direction. It wasn't a dream because nothing happened. The heart just hung there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Karl O, Knausgaard, and I'm going to read from my first novel in English. It's called A Time for Everything, and it's basically set in the Bible. So I retell some of the stories in the Bible, Cain and Abel, and the story about the flood and Noah. But in this version, Noah has a sister, and they live in a village by the fjords, and then one day it starts to rain, and it doesn't stop raining, it keeps on raining. The water is rising, and in the end they had to flew up in the mountains to be safe. Everybody except Noah, because he's in a boat. Noah, who had stayed below deck ever since the ship has glided out of the forest, certainly didn't know she was there. Or rather, he suspected it. But for him, it had become two sides of the same coin. He hadn't wanted it to be like this. He would have preferred it if the ship hadn't drifted into the mountain, and that Anna weren't there. If he had been able to help her, he would have done so, but he couldn't. When he heard her shout, he rose to go up. He didn't want to. It was perhaps the very last thing he wanted to do, but he had to. He owed it to her. He'd taken a couple of steps before he halted. In a few hours, the mountain would vanish. Soon the sea would cover the entire earth. Then he could go up. That was the way he had planned it, and that was still the way it was going to happen. He went back and sat down again. When Anna called for a second time, he put his head in his hands, but he did not go out. As soon as she realized that he wouldn't come, she went with the others to the top of the mountain. They sat down in the hollow. Anna got food out of her bag, and they began to eat. No one spoke. Everyone took longer over the meal than normal. The sea was a mere 5 yards below them now. What had been a long, continuous mountain ridge an hour ago was now a string of small islands. On the nearest one, they could see people sitting just like them, huddled on the island's highest point, while the waves beat against the land just below them. That was all. The rest was sea. Vast and grey, the sea lay all around them. Its glinting surface stretched away on all sides, gently curving toward the horizon, beneath the sky's thick, dark cloud layer. The changes had been so many and so great, and had come in such a short space of time, that it was only now Anna fully realized where they were. That sense of location that always tells us where we are, even when we're not thinking about it, that seldom allows us to be surprised, even when, sunk deep in thought, we get up to one end of the day and go over and look out the window, had become disrupted in Anna over the past few days. If she looked down for a moment and thought about something else, she would get the same surprise each time. She lifted her head again. Is this where we are? It wasn't that she thought she was somewhere else, just that she had assumed, quite unconsciously. When she glanced up, it was the valley she'd expected to see, or the summer farm, or the waterfall, or even the mountain from the day before. But not this. All of them sitting out at sea, eating. The baby had gone to sleep, and Rachel put him on the blanket between them. Everyone sat there looking at him. Rachel smiled. "Isn't he lovely?" she said. She leaned forward and kissed him gently on the cheek. Around them, dusk was falling. In the western horizon, the clouds glimmered weakly in the light of the setting sun. They had moved right into the middle and made a ring of luggage around them. The sea was 6 feet below them now. It was totally calm. They saw no movement in it, not even a wave. Yet it rose. It rose quiet, noiselessly. "Yes, he is lovely," Anna said. "I've never been so proud of anyone as I was when you gave birth to him." "Haven't you?" said Rachel, smiling again. She placed her hand on Jirak's knee. "I think I screamed the most dreadful things at Mum. Luckily I can't remember what they were." She looked at her mother. "Can you?" Anna smiled. "It's all part and parcel," she said. Then there was silence. Shortly afterward, the first ripple came lapping in towards them. It didn't recede, but just rolled on, and seemed to well slowly up as it mingled with a ripple that came stealing in from the other direction. They crept closer together. Rachel lifted the baby and held him to her. Jirak put his arms around her. "Is he sleeping?" whispered Anna. Another ripple washed in between them. Rachel shook her head. "He's awake. He's looking at Jirak." Javan stood up. Anna turned her head and glanced the same way. Perhaps 15 yards away lay the ship, black in the greyish dusk. It was drifting toward them. Anna looked down. Water covered the entire mountain now. All was sea. But the ship was approaching. Could Noah have changed his mind? Was he going to pick them up after all? Of course he was going to pick them up. The boy was here. The boy was here. "Noah!" she shouted. "Dear Noah, we're in danger!" Noah had been sure it was all over when he heard her sudden cry. If he waited a bit longer, he would never again be able to hear her voice. That was the easiest, the most sensible thing. At the same time, he wanted her to know that he knew what he was doing. When he rose up to go, his wife held him back. "Don't go up there," she said. "Please, wait an hour, then you can go up, but not now, my dear." He shook himself free of her and went up the steps to the top deck, bent his head beneath the low roof and went aft. The ship was 10 yards off when Noah came out. They saw him quite clearly. He was dressed in white, and his skin was white, and he stood in the stern looking down at them. "Noah!" Anna shouted. "You must save us! Save us, Noah!" Noah remained motionless when he stood. He just stared at them. Anna took the baby from Rachel and raised him above her head so that he could see. He saw. When, immediately afterward, Anna laid the child to her breast and turned away, she was no longer despairing or angry or scared. All of these feelings had vanished into a great calm. They were going to die, and Noah would live on with the memory of what he had done. Soon after, Noah also turned on his heel, moved down the deck, and was gone. He did not return, and slowly the ship drifted past them into the night. Nobody spoke. Anna looked down at the baby. He gazed at her with his placid dark eyes. She handed him to Rachel and sat down. Suddenly Javan burst out laughing. "Well, I never thought I'd live to see that," he exclaimed. Everyone laughed. When the laughter had died out, nothing more was said for a long time. They sat silently staring out into the darkness as the water rose around them. Rachel held the baby tightly to her breast. When the water was up to the waist, she glanced at her mother. Her mother smiled back. "Is he asleep?" she whispered. Rachel shook her head. "I'm sorry about that," she said. Gently, she pushed the baby down and held him under the water. She looked at her mother the whole time. "I'm sorry about that," she said again. And then I'm going to read the first page of this book called My Struggle. For the heart, life is simple. It beats for as long as it can, then it stops. Sooner or later, one day, this pounding action will cease of its own accord, and the blood will begin to run towards the body's lowest point, where it will collect in a small pool, visible from outside as a dark, soft patch on ever-whitening skin. As the temperature sinks, the limb stiffens, and intestines drain. These changes in the first hours occur so slowly and take place with such inexorability that there is something almost ritualistic about them, as though life capitulates according to specific rules, a kind of gentleman's agreement to which the representatives of death also adhere, inasmuch as they always wait until life has retreated before they launch their invasion of the new landscape. By which point, however, the invasion is irrevocable. The enormous hordes of bacteria that begin to infiltrate the body's innards cannot be halted. Had they but tried a few hours earlier, they would have met immediately resistance. However, everything around them is quiet now, as they delve deeper and deeper into the moist darkness. They advance on the Harris channels, the crypts of Liebekyn, the Isle of Longer Hans. They proceed to Bowman's capsule in the Rennes, Clark's column in the Spinalis, the black substance in the mesencephalon, and they arrive at the heart. As yet, it is intact, but deprived of the activity to which end this whole construction had been designed. There is something strangely desolate about it. Like a production plant that workers have been forced to flee in haste, or so it appears. The stationary vehicle shining yellow against the darkness of the forest. The huts deserted, a line of fully loaded cable buckets stretching up the hillside. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Luc Sante, and I've never written anything remotely reflective of the Messiah, so I wrote something for the occasion. It's called Dear Messiah. You were born in Houston to a 14-year-old single mother. You were the surviving child of twins born to an affluent family. Your mother was a former slave. A sensitive and sickly child, vague and dreamy, you were often taken to be mentally retarded and were beaten regularly at school by your teachers and at home by your father. You began singing at a young age and soon became a sports car journalist and test driver for your own car racing magazine, Auto Pop. You began experiencing fainting spells at age 9, and people took your sleepwalking as evidence of secret powers. While still a schoolboy, you began to reject the Talmud. You underwent what was interchangeably described as the benediction, the immensity, the sacredness, the vastness, and most often, the otherness. Beginning in your youth, you were uncomfortable with sexuality, especially your own. After service in the Red Army, you settled in Minusинsk. You worked as a traffic policeman before losing your job in 1989. You were convicted of practicing pharmacy without a license and fined 200,000 yen. On August 28, 1974, you were arrested in Harlingen, Texas for stealing credit cards. You took over the identity of your deceased predecessor and in so doing completely erased your own. You had a son named Imperator. You had 4 children, Osiris, Isis, Iris, Hypatia. You asserted that your marriage was never physically consummated. You asserted that though you lay naked with virgins, when the virgins asked you for sex, you refused. You were commanded to take a wife of whoredom as the first symbolic act of your calling. You spent your street days wandering the streets of Council Bluffs, wearing a long white robe, and became a local oddity. You exhibited a 666 tattoo on your forearm. Witnesses stated that you had nail marks in your hands. You felt compelled to eat non-kosher food and speak the forbidden name of God. You gained notoriety for the many Rolls Royces that were bought for your use, eventually numbering 93. Your status as a rock singer was very localized. You spoke to an estimated 10,000 in a spacious former casino. Your speech was often peppered with words of your own invention, such as physicalating and tangiblated. Robed in white, you stood behind the curtain and the light brought out in full relief the gilt letters of the Tetragrammaton, which you had placed upon your breast. In the estimated presence of 1 to 500 people, you announced the end of the world and ordered the extermination of 16 enemy families. You claimed that you could slay 10,000 men by hitting your left hand with your right. You addressed tablets to the kings and rulers of the world, asking them to accept your revelation, renounce their material possessions, work together to settle disputes, and endeavor toward the betterment of the world and its peoples. You wrote a book which you said was dictated to you by angels. You dictated 3 books under the influence of nitrous oxide administered to you by your private dentist. You inscribed messianic formulas on your hands and corrected Isaiah 45:1 to include yourself. You wrote your beliefs on a piece of paper and had it read aloud, but due to the clamor among the people, it could not be heard. In a spiritual vision, you were shown a plot of land containing the graves of such members of your community as are destined to be in heaven. The prophet Elijah appeared to you in a dream and led you to a beautiful garden where you saw the pious of all ages in the form of birds flying through the garden and studying the Mishnah. You employed mystic prayers of your own composition to call upon the names of angels not accepted by the church canon. You claim to have led a convoy of rocket ships to Earth from the extinct planet Neophrtes. You taught that dissatisfaction and evil among blacks caused a major explosion to happen on Earth 66 trillion years ago, creating the current moon that orbits the planet. You asserted that a network of drug companies, banks, and psychiatrists were conspiring against you in a bid to take over the world. You threatened to drive the Christians into the sea, and you launched a major military offensive with your 1,500 dervishes equipped with 20 modern rifles. You said, "I am," at which point the high priest tore his own robe in anger and accused you of blasphemy. You declared the founding of the heavenly kingdom of transcendent peace on January 11th, 1851. The total volume of your works is more than 70 times the size of the Quran and more than 15 times the size of the Old and New Testaments of the Bible. You claimed that you discovered a mathematical code in the text of the Quran involving the number 19. You changed granite into sugar candy, changed water into gasoline, produced objects on demand, changed the color of your gown while wearing it, multiplied food, healed acute and chronic diseases, appeared in visions and dreams, made different fruits appear on actual stems on any tree, controlled the weather, physically transformed into various deities, and physically emitted brilliant light. You authorized the burning of lists of pedigrees and books of law and theology because of their association with the old regime. You will lead the 10 lost tribes back to the Holy Land while riding on a lion with a 7-headed dragon in its jaws. Your face will be visible on the moon, the sun, and the black stone in Mecca. You will reign over the whole world with 2 legitimate authorities, not only religious, but also political. After your judgment, you will throw the corrupt into the fire. The kingdom of heaven began to collapse in 1880, when both of your children died of diphtheria. Your son was suddenly killed at the age of 22 when he fell through a skylight while pacing back and forth in prayer and meditation. The departure of your disciples weakened, demoralized, and angered you, and it was at this juncture that you composed your most famous poem, The Tree of Bad Counsel. During a meal, you predicted that one of your disciples would betray you. Followed by your disciples, you rode a donkey to the edge of the bluffs, whereupon you leaped off the edge. In 1706, you were killed by your nephew during a discussion about money matters. You died in Chatsworth, California on December 10, 1958, in a suicide bombing instigated by 2 disgruntled former followers. In June 1934, you left Detroit for Chicago and disappeared without a trace. You suddenly disappeared, and the extravagant hopes of your followers suddenly came to an end. Your remaining disciples tore your bloody shirt from your body and divided it up for relics. Your remains were dumped outside the gates of the town to be eaten by animals. There were many among your followers who did not accept your demise and expected your imminent return. You are said to have descended from the higher planes and manifested a physical body in early 1977 in the Himalayas. Then, on July 19th, 1977, to have taken a commercial airplane flight from Pakistan to England. Thank you.
Hi everybody. You should go out and buy everything Luc Sante has ever published. These are my heroes. It's nice to see you all. It's a privilege to read before this large audience for Saturday night. I mean, I know you're all here to see Jennifer Egan, but let's not, let's pretend we don't know that. I think about flight a lot. And for me, that is one of the most potent symbols of the otherworldly when I consider flight. So I just want to read 2 short pieces that are somewhat connected to each other. They're strongly connected to each other, though they were not intended as such. Both have to do with bird flight. I'm going to begin with a short little story that I wrote. It's about 4 minutes long, and then I'm going to read the last page and a half of my novel Open City, which is also about 4 minutes long. The thing with this story I'm about to read, it's a little bit different. The novel is written. The prose is well behaved. This story, the sentences are kind of long. I'll say period when I get to the end of the sentence. The museum was anthropological in the obsolete style, and I could see the fluidity of the categories. On the one hand, of black, primitive, and native cultures, and on the other, the clusters of chimpanzee, mandrill, and gorilla families in the taxidermy displays in the adjacent hall. The context making the continuity between human and animal all but explicit, and I became even more strongly aware that the halls were full of children and young people having their heads passively stuffed with obscenities that would, in the future and in some other context, draw on to shape their interactions with people from distant countries. Period. The light was low in the big old rooms, but the displays were spotlit, and I was drawn in not just by the fossilized ideas about color, race, and kinship, but also by the dioramas, which brought to mind a friend whose father in the 1950s had been employed in building just such dead life and living death chambers. The animals stuffed and mounted with painted backgrounds, the amazing antelopes, greater kudu, elands, rhinos and zebras, the dinosaur bones, which were seamlessly falsified with casts and which testified to long-vanished violent struggles for survival, and above all, the study cases full of stuffed birds, endless varieties of birds in the subtle coloration common to these inhabitants of the air, the spots, flecks, stripes, couple color, the greys, browns, grey-browns, brown-greys, yellowish whites, whites, blacks, and faded reds and greens with dull yellow daubs where the eyes once were. Period. Looking at these long dead creepers, swallows, sparrows, wrens, nuthatches, thrushes, egrets, gulls, jays, diving ducks, titmice, crows, as well as the falcons, vultures, eagles, and all the surprising varieties of hawks, their feathers smoothed and folded, their feet tucked in beneath them so that each looked as though it were diving into water, I felt at moments the sensation of a bird pulsing in my enclosed hands like a feathery heart, and at other moments of myself turning into a bird and plunging heedlessly across the air with avian single-mindedness. And when I encounter the case full of owls, those marvelous night hunters who surpass us in sensitivity as master musicians do the tone-deaf, who, blindfolded, hunt mice by the sound of their scampering, their white tufted faces out in some far region beyond secrets and the divulging of secrets, angelic, with all the terror the word implied, I was ready to believe anything, accept and endure anything for their sakes, ready to hand myself over as an uncomplaining servant of the natural world, particularly the world of the feathered, beaked and winged creatures. And this must have been why I thought later that night that the old erhu player I encountered in the subway at Grand Street, as shriveled and trembly as his instrument, and the Peking opera singer who sang beside him, her voice thin and bright, her lipstick thin and bright, were also the image of marvelous unnamed birds who had somehow been captured by the mind's eye in the middle of their flight, right in the middle of their swift and breathtaking flight. So that's that story. And I'm going to, spoiler alert, this is how Open City ends. And the people who have read it are like, hey, doesn't really give away too much. The narrator is a young Nigerian-German psychiatrist called Julius. Within a few minutes of our entering the upper bay, we saw the Statue of Liberty, a faint green in the mist, then very quickly massive and towering over us, a monument worthy of the name, with the thick folds of her dress as stately as columns. The boat came close to the island, and more of the students had by now moved up onto the deck, and they pointed, and their voices, which filled the air around us, fell echolessly into the water. The cruise organizer came up to me. "Glad you came, aren't you?" I acknowledged his greeting with a faint smile, and he, sensing my solitude, went away again. The crown of the statue has remained closed since late 2001, and even those visitors who come close to it are confined to look upward at the statue. No one is permitted to climb up the 354 narrow steps and look out into the bay from the windows in the crown. Bartholdi's monumental statue has not, in any case, done particularly long service as a destination for tourists. Although it had its symbolic value right from the beginning, until 1902, it was a working lighthouse, the biggest in the country. In those days, the flame that shone from the torch-guided ships into Manhattan's harbor, that same light, especially in bad weather, fatally disoriented birds. The birds, many of which were clever enough to dodge the cluster of skyscrapers in the city, somehow lost their bearings when faced with a single monumental flame. A large number of birds met their death in this manner. In 1888, for instance, on the morning after one particularly stormy night, more than 1,400 dead birds were recovered from the crown, the balcony of the torch, and the pedestal of the statue. The officials of the island saw an opportunity there, and as was their custom, sold the birds off at low cost to New York City milliners and fancy stores. But it was to be the last time that they would do so, because one Colonel Tassin, who had military command of the island, intervened and was determined that any birds that happened to die in the future would not be disposed of commercially, but would be retained in the service of science. The carcasses, each time 200 or more of them had been gathered, were to be sent to the Washington National Museum, the Smithsonian Institution, and other scientific institutions. With this strong instinct for public spiritedness, Colonel Tassin undertook a government system of records which he ensured were kept with military regularity. And shortly afterward, he was able to deliver detailed reports on each death, including the species of the bird, date, hour of striking, number killed, direction and force of the wind, character of the weather, and general remarks. On October 1 of that year, for example, the colonel's report indicated that 50 rails had died, as had 11 wrens, 2 catbirds, and 1 whippoorwill. The following day, the record showed 2 dead wrens, the day after that, 8 wrens. The average, Colonel Tassin estimated, was about 20 birds per night, although the weather and the direction of the wind had a great deal to do with the resulting harvest. Nevertheless, the sense persisted that something more troubling was at work. On the morning of October 13, for example, 175 wrens had been gathered in, all dead of the impact, although the night just past hadn't been particularly windy or dark. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Riikka Pulkkinen from Finland, and I heard that there was a girl called Anna in the previous text, and there's also a girl called Anna in my text, and in Finnish Anna means to give, so that's my messianic theme. And since there are some people who haven't heard Finnish, I'm going to read in Finnish first. Anna tarvitsee enää Eevan äänen. Puu kantaa kukintojaan heidän yläpuolellaan niin kuin olisi keksinyt itsensä vasta eilen. Tämä on tapahtunut ennenkin, juuri tämä sama, eikä kuitenkaan koskaan näin täytenä ja tuoreena kuin nyt. Myös Eevalle olivat nämä samat päivät. Tämä levottomuuskin oli hänen, malttamattomuus olla jo toisaalla, jossakin, jossa elämä tarjoaa itseään täydempänä. Ja yhä edelleen Eevan oli rakkaus, sama joka on Annan. Antaa kaikkensa ja saada koko maailma. Tähän Eeva uskoi. Niin hän teki tytön kanssa, niin miehen. Anna ei aikonut kertoa Eevasta Saaralle, mutta tässä Eeva on ja vaatii kertomista. Annan ääni on hiukan eri, pehmeämpi, täydempi, kun hän aloittaa. 1964. Näin kaikki alkaa. Tässä minä olen. Seison ovella, olen soittamaisillani ovikelloa. Kun kaikki alkaa, uusia iskulauseita ei ole vielä keksitty, mutta pieni pilleri on jo nähnyt päivänvalon. On jo kysytty, mitä tapahtuu todella, mutta hameenhelmat ovat vielä maltillisen mittaisia ja lehmät ammuvat navetoissa. Kun kaikki alkaa, minä olen 22-vuotias. Minulla on puolen tutkinnon verran yliopisto-opintoja, huolettomia liian pitkiksi venyviä iltoja ravintoloissa ja ajoittainen kova koti-ikävä Kainuuseen, jossa äitini ja isäni pitävät 10 lehmää ja 6 mullia punamullalla maalatussa pihapiirissä. Siellä, mistä minä tulen, Kuhmossa, maito juodaan lypsylämpimänä, kaadetaan laseihin pääläristä. Se jättää suuhun paksun kelmun. And now almost the same text in English. Anna's thoughts return to Eva. What does she know about her? She only has a few facts. Eva was from Kuhmo and moved to the city to study French language and literature. Anna conjures up a picture in her mind. Eva furrowed her brow when she was reading, which made her look a little worried. She had small hands, caught colds in the winter. Some kind of vague seriousness lodged in her eyebrows. When she buttered her bread or washed the dishes or brushed her hair, she would lose herself for a moment in the motions, look dreamy, relaxed and happy, like women in turn-of-the-century paintings. When she was about to laugh, she first looked startled for a moment. 100th of a second later, you could see horror in her face. Then the laughter would come bursting out. Anna has this picture in her mind, and the beginning of the story on her lips. A man, a child, the child's astonishingly white neck, her trust. The man had been one of the most admired of his day. Not at the forefront of change, not a provocateur, but certainly the most promising and indisputably the most handsome. A charmer, one of those men you sit down with in a restaurant and you don't get up for the rest of the evening. The kind of man you want to ask for directions to reality. Have him look across the table and tell you what it's really all about. Everyone wanted a piece of him. His attention was accepted like a gift. When he looked at you, it felt like you had never really had a shape until the moment. Artists are like that. They have the power to see. They carry all the weightiest, best-shaped ideas. They make things real that would otherwise remain lurking at the threshold, at the bus stop around the corner, in parentheses. Anna still needs Eva's voice. The tree holds its blossoms above them as it invented itself only yesterday. This has happened before, the exact same thing, but it has never been so fresh and complete as now. Eva had days like these, even this restlessness, this impatience to be somewhere else, someplace where life offered itself fully. And there was more. Eva had love just like Anna, to give her all and get the whole world. That's what she believed in. That's what she was doing with the little girl just as much as with the man. Anna didn't intend to tell Sara about Eva, but Eva is here now demanding that story be told. Anna's voice is a little different, softer, fuller, as she begins. 1964. This is how it all begins. Here I am. I'm standing at the door, about to ring the doorbell. When it all begins, the new slogans haven't been invented yet, but the pill has already made its first appearance. People are already asking what's really happening, but skirt lengths are still of a sober length, and cows still low in their barns. When it all begins, I'm 22 years old. I'm halfway through my studies in spite of late nights in restaurants and occasionally tough bouts of homesickness for Kuhmo, where my mother and father keep 10 cows and 6 bulls in a farmyard painted with red clay. Where I come from, milk is drunk warm from the milking, poured into glasses straight from the pail. It leaves a thick coating in your mouth. When it all begins, I'm living between two worlds. I have Helsinki glasses of wine, bought with the last of my money, smiles that I toss across the room without thinking of the consequences, boys that I...
Jennifer Egan for their wonderful readings tonight. Also, I'd like to thank the Invisible Dog for their hosting of this event, the Poetry Society of America, a public space, and of course Penn for creating it, and all of you for coming. There's one last thing I'd like to mention, which is the Arthur Miller Freedom to Write Lecture, which is going to be a Q&A session with Salman Rushdie, moderated by Gary Steingart, and that's happening tomorrow afternoon. You can find the details in the Penn Festival Guide, which is at the door or at penn.org. And thank you so much for coming. There's wine and bread for all.